Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. I am your host, Chad Porto. Joining me, as always, is the glorious one himself, Marcus Green. Marcus, how the heck are you?
Doing okay, man. We got a full plate tonight. The title for the show is hilarious. Uh, should be a fun one.
It's a fun play on a tweet that I saw. The Virgin Cody versus the Chad SANADA, but I also added a Nintendo, or Sega does what Nintendo don't twist to it. So it's going to be interesting. Marcus, before we go any further, how was your Easter? Did you do anything? Maybe get together with some relatives, eat some food?
No, thankfully just kept it chill. Didn't really get nobody called a few people to wish them a happy Easter, but it was pretty much just a chill Sunday for me. Kind of how I like it.
That's how I like it. Give me a little ham, a little cheesy potatoes. I'm kosher. I'm good. Solid. Speaking of solid things, Sexy Sonata, top dog in New Japan. Finally, I think he's 36. And I've been following Sonata's career ever since All Japan lost the great Muda in a mass exodus in like 2012, I think it was, when Muda went on to form Wrestle One. Sonata was kind of tapped to be their next top guy. It was Sonata and a Japanese wrestler, if I remember correctly, by the name of Kai, Kai, and those were going to be the Stone Cold and Rock of the company. But of course, Sonata went to Impact on pretty much an excursion for about a year, and then things kind of broke down with Wrestle One, and Sonata got kind of lost in the shuffle in New Japan for a while. But over the last some time, they've really done a great job building him back up, giving him a new look, having him shave that god awful beard, and actually making him look like a star. And then he did the star maker thing that stars do, and he beat Okada for the belt. And I truly think this was not the original plan. I think they had wanted to put the belt on Jonah, because Jonah beat Okada. What was it, during the G1 or something? Because it was before he went back to the WWE, so it was like last summer, I think. And I think the plan was for Jonah, and this is a theory. I have no proof about this, but I think the theory was for Jonah to win the belt. But when that didn't happen, I think they sidestepped it and went with Sonata as the next top guy. And I think they went with the right call. We'll know how things go depending on how long he holds the belt for. Evil didn't hold the belt for that long, thank goodness. We know that Shingo Takagi didn't hold the belt for all that long. We know that Naito never holds the belt for all that long. So if he holds the belt for, 300, 400, 500 days, then clearly they believe in Sonata. I would believe in Sonata, but of course the gates, the ticket sales, merchandise, TV revenue, all that's going to determine how long Sonata's on top. Because, hate to break it to you, that's how pro wrestling is measured. Not in work rate, but in buy rates. I like that. If I ever bring back shirts, that's going to be a shirt.
I'm glad you said it because I was on it. Um, Not about work rates, it's about buy rates. You never saw the die on the back. Um, yeah, I mean, look, I think it says a lot that look, it has been an absolute odyssey for Sonata get to the championship. We always talk about, always kind of bring up the phrasing about, kind of always bridesmaid, never the bride, and that's absolutely feels like Sonata's story in New Japan in terms of um, him trying to become world champion. Obviously, he's held tag belts, obviously with Evil, and then I think he's obviously been never open weight or some other singles championship, but never the big Kahuna, if you will. So you wanna win big, you got to make some big changes, and like you said, got rid of that beard and switched up the look, and probably made the biggest move that a lot of people didn't see coming, leaving Lij. And we seen what it did for Evil, but I don't even know if that worked out fully for Evil when it happened. Um, Even though he is now known as a former world champion, but with Sonata, I think it just hits more because you know, like you said, it feels like it's been forever and a day. Like you, I've been following for a long time, me, obviously, a little bit after you because I started watching when he initially came to Impact, as I think Seiya Sonata.
Mm-hmm.
And then been following, that whole journey, and then coming out Impact and going to New Japan, and then feels like he got, like most guys, get breathe new life into him. But then it got to a period there where he kind of became, in a lot of ways, the Ziggler, where it's like he delivered a good match, but you just knew he wasn't gonna win, specifically when everything was on the line. So you kind of faded to the background, which is also easy to do in Lij when you are led by Naito, got Hiromu on the side of you, and they bring in somebody like Takagi, who absolutely just takes the spotlight. So you know, this is interesting to see. His career's taking a whole new turn, and I think, like you said, it says something about what they look forward to doing if they're gonna do this with him. So
Should be interesting. That's going to be a fun thing to check out. Dr. Wagner Jr. is going to be heading to Noah apparently in a title match April 16th. I think that's what's going on because I think Jack Morris is a Noah wrestler. And there's a little Noah banner, so we'll see what happens there. So I'm excited to see what the era of Sonata looks like, but not as excited as I am, or maybe slightly less excited, I should say, because I think I'm more excited for Sonata than I am for Jay White. But Jay White is all elite. And I think this was actually always the case. And people are like, well, why would he only, he's done with New Japan, so why would he sign with All Elite when he can work with New Japan? And to that I say, not everyone wants to. And it has nothing to do with New Japan. Like, if you knew that every few months you were going to be, flying over on a 18, 22, I don't know how many hours it is. It might be 30 hours. Like a significantly day-long flight to Japan every other week or every 2 weeks, and you're going to be there for an indefinite amount of time and then come back, that's a lot. Like there are guys that go to promotions all the time that they just don't want to do that grind anymore. So I'm not surprised at all that Jay White would want to leave New Japan because if he's no longer in New Zealand because he's a New Zealander, and if he's located stateside, then that's a much longer flight. It's a much longer, area, length of travel. So I'm not surprised at all that he wanted to go to AEW. But there is some circling reports that may have influenced it. I don't think they did. We'll talk about it briefly now, but we'll go further into it in the next two stories. But there seems to be a hiring freeze in WWE that has affected internal, staffers within the company, but it may have also affected wrestlers in the company as well. But we'll get to that more into a second, and that may have been a reason for why Jay White picked AEW, not WWE. I don't think it is, but we don't know. Marcus, thoughts on Jay White hitting AEW?
kind of seems like a natural progression of things. Honestly, he's had damn near Hall of Fame stint in New Japan with his rise to stardom. Um, the way that it happened, as fast that it happened, and to me, he's probably one of the most notable antagonists to ever come through there, with all the feuds and stuff the guys that he had him with, and just the amount of havoc that he wreaked. I mean, for freak's sake, he broke up Okada and Gato.
Mm-hmm.
That'll kind of do it. So his stamp is forever, um, left in Japan in New Japan. Period. And obviously he's been doing some stuff with Impact, and obviously elevating Ace and Bay, but they certainly on track right now as champions and doing their thing, killing it. Um, but with the whole Bullet Club thing in flux, obviously him finishing up and staying the company, and like you said, like just the travel back and forth from New Japan to the States, that's a grind in itself. You almost don't even need to wrestle. It's almost like wrestling, honestly. Um, like that insane thing that happened with one of the FTR guys for that match that they had with was it the Briscoe? No, it wasn't the Briscoes. It was somebody else. Um, recently when one of their bags was late and they had to one of the flights was late and they had to immediately come from the airport to the show to the match. Um, it was insane. But
Hmm.
you do it for the love of do it for the love of the grind as hard as it is and for the business. And you can't really beat that New Japan competition. But it is the grind and I think it does get tiring and I think we've seen a lot of guys kinda as great as it is to go to New Japan and get elevated like that, it it puts some years on you. And I think, you see guys like FTR and guys like Jay White do their thing over there, but obviously they live over here. So, it just makes it just more feasible, makes more sense. And if they can make reasonably the same amount, if not more money with in AEW and seemingly get similar competition, it kind of just makes sense. And with WWE, like you said, we don't exactly know why he didn't necessarily go there, but with everything that's going on right now, he might have probably made the right decision, even with everything that we've been talking about with the turmoil backstage and whatnot dealing with Khan.
That's kind of the thing I was wondering. Um, Specifically, if the pay was similar or not, and he's going to be working probably less dates for more money. So it probably makes sense for him to show up in AEW instead of going back and forth. The other thing I think is important to realize when you look at some of these guys like Tanahashi and Okada, they came up through the New Japan system from the get go. I know Jay White and Juice Robinson at one point. I think Jay White was a young boy, but they didn't start in New Japan. You know, Tanahashi and Okada, kind of like how they do it in soccer in the UK, they were scouted out young. So they've been there for 20 odd years. And it's not just the country, it's the promotion they have a loyalty to. While guys like Juice Robinson, Jay White, and others went to New Japan for the opportunity, not so much because they were, for lack of a better term, groomed and raised by them. I know some guys in Japan are scouted as early as high school. Some colleges have pro wrestling training, so pro wrestling is a very big deal in Japan, and I think people oftentimes don't realize that outside of the bigger bubble about what to actually expect when you go there, and it's not for everybody, and it can be a hell of a grind. And if you don't live in Japan, there's really no reason to make it your full time stop. Once you get there, it's a great experience, but obviously mitigating travel and travel expenses is always a priority for wrestlers. Speaking of priorities for wrestlers, Nigel McGuinness is now all elite. It seems like he's going to be doing work with the Ring of Honor brand, but who knows what's going to happen there. There are rumors that he may come out of retirement for a few matches. Uh, don't know what that'll look like. He's, I think, well into his 40s, and he hasn't wrestled in 13 years, 12 years, 14 years, something like that. He hasn't wrestled since 2010, I want to say, or maybe early 2011 when he was with TNA, now Impact.
Miss seeing that Tower of London.
Right? That was a great move. But the thing is, like, I don't even think if he did come back, I'd want to see him come back because part of what made Nigel McGuinness or Desmond Wolfe so impressive is the fact that he was so vicious. And when he was with Ring of Honor, back when he had the spiky blonde hair and the little squares in his head with the spikes that came up, when he was doing that, he was physical on another level. And I don't know after all these years if he can still hit that because he wasn't as technically sound as say William Regal. You look at Bryan Danielson, he can still be a little vicious, but it's his technicality, it's his profound soundness with his movement that makes you go, holy shit, this guy hasn't lost a step. But if you watch Bryan Danielson in 2023 and Bryan Danielson in 2003, you're going to realize that he's not as violent and ferocious with his strikes and his physicality. He was like watching a fullback at 5'8" and 175 pounds beat the shit out of somebody. He doesn't do that anymore. People can bring up, well, he does still kick people, and he does. And he does still, do foot smashes, and he does. And he does some palm strikes. But like this, like even if you were to rate him as a B in terms of his physicality, This dude was SSSSSS plus in his physicality. Like the two are not the same. Similar, yes. I was gonna say similarities, yes, but similar, yes, but not the same. And Nigel was just as ferocious as Brian. Same with Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe's declined significantly in the last 20 years. I don't know if Nigel can still go to that level or if he has a next gear underneath it that would make it work. You look at somebody like Edge, I know some people are going to be twisted about this. Edge has not been a great wrestler since 2003 when he broke his neck. When he came back from his neck injury, he was a vastly different wrestler from who he was in 2002 and 2001. He wasn't as quick. He wasn't impactful. But the difference was Edge wasn't so quick and so impactful that his return was seen as a huge letdown. He was never really, like, he was a great all-around guy, but he didn't do any one thing well, or too well, I should say. So when he came back the first time after the neck injury, it was like, all right, he's still good enough. And now that he's come back again, it's like, yeah, he's still not bad. Like he can bump, he can sell, but there's nothing about him that you're like, oh God. I remember when he was, in his 30s and he could do this, and it was great, because that's already been long done. Edge had that next gear of going from a very athletic, high flying for a 6'3" dude, with a lot of impactful moves, because he did like a running big boot for a while. The spear looked a lot better. He did that spinning heel kick, which I haven't seen him do in forever. He went from that to being more of a sports entertainer, and he found that next gear. He became successful in this next era of his career. I don't know if Nigel, if he ever comes out of retirement to wrestle, can do that. So I think commentary, backstage hosting, training, coaching, whatever they do, I think that's the role that he would do very well in. However, if he does come out of retirement, I would be very interested to see. Marcus, how do you feel about Nigel McGuinness being all elite?
No, I think it's good. Look, I echo your sentiments in terms of potentiality of an in-ring return. You just don't know, and obviously you always harken back to people's heydays. Just listening to you talk about Desmond Wolfe over it all, me kind of switching my mind back and remember some of that stuff. Like obviously Triple H is known as the cerebral assassin. But when you talk about what that really means, I think of guys like Desmond Wolfe. Like the way he moved, the way he broke down opponents, just like even how he was on the mic, his presentation, his demeanor, all that, spoke to being a cerebral assassin. Um, but yeah, time is undefeated. So who knows what levels of injuries he's racked up. If obviously we always talk about the mobility of it all and lacking that. And to your credit, what you was talking about with Edge, not everybody is able to shift those gears. Even with Brian now, he's still brutal, but it's kind of like a more reasonable brutality, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas also when you're younger, you kind of just you could be more reckless because you bounce back faster. This and the third. Now it's like a lot of stuff that he do probably does more damage to himself than even some of his opponents' maneuvers. So yeah, I think obviously it's a little bit kind of cautiously, potentially optimistic about him having an ring return. But I think somebody like him is even more valuable behind the scenes. His knowledge that he can pass on to these guys, his probably business acumen that he's picked up. Obviously, you're talking about looking at that deal that they just revealed with them going to the UK, and we already know how insane UK fans are as wrestling fans. So that's huge for them, and obviously, you would imagine Nigel had a big hand in that. So, I think that's the top value that he brings. Not saying he can't do an in-ring return, because I think, ironically enough, if he would do one, that'll be the space to do it. Because look at what Sting's doing, and I think he's probably been the best, like I said before, best booked vet at his stage that we've seen. So.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's just good that they got him. Period. I think he's invaluable in anybody's roster, but specifically AEW with a lot of these guys like Darby and Orange Cassidy and MJF and the like. It's a lot. There's a lot they can get from him. Hopefully they just don't. Hopefully they just take the knowledge in. Because obviously that's been a thing in the past too, alluding to what I guess some of the stuff that Punk said about a lot of these guys just don't want to listen. So.
We'll see what happens with the Nigel McGuinness of it all. I think it's going to be very interesting. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be, interesting in itself, but, time will tell how the Nigel of it all happens. Now, Nigel happened to be a free agent because he was released by the WWE amid cuts last year. I think it happened before Triple H took over creative. And Jay White was rumored to be going to WWE, but of course there were issues with WWE apparently having no hiring, new talents. Plus, there's going to be a bunch of layoffs in the corporate offices. We haven't seen Eric Young, who signed in November, so that's been 6 months. Do I think Jay White was going to end up in WWE regardless? No. Do I think Vince McMahon returning to power affected that? No, because I think Jay White was already going to AEW long before that. However, I do think these are now going to be issues going forward for new guys. Brian Cage is free agent. Tama Tonga is apparently was or is a free agent. You have who else was it? Santana may be a free agent soon enough. You have a ton of guys. Nick Aldis, who's a free agent. I think all of these guys are no longer going to be WWE bound because Vince has so much more say in creative, at least with the bigger picture, as he said, that I don't think people are going to be popping up like was expected. But I also want to kind of point out, and Marcus, feel free to disagree because I always encourage disagreement because I don't think I'm always right. I just think that the way I see things is the way I see things. Vince did not do a great job running creative. Triple H has not done a great job running creative. Yeah, he fell into the Bloodline storyline, and he didn't make it worse until he made it worse. Then we have, the Sami Zayn of it all. Like clearly, he should have been the guy to dethrone Roman at WrestleMania, but whoever decided it wasn't the time, dumb. Then you have Triple H's, pet projects. He brought back Karrion Kross and Scarlett Bordeaux. Where are they? He brought back Jonah. I forget what his name is on the WWE roster, but I haven't seen him.
Reed, yeah.
Bronson Reed. I haven't seen him.
He had a kaiju match tonight with Blurby.
Blurby was left off WrestleMania. Dakota Kai or Dakota Sky, whatever we're calling her not these days. She hasn't really done anything of relevance. She won the WWE Women's Tag Team titles, but the WWE Women's Tag Team titles haven't been relevant since Triple H took over. They haven't been relevant since before he took over, but he didn't help them at all either. Then you look at some of the things going around with you other of the returned hires, your Samuel Shaws and your likes, and it's just kind of real. It's a realization that Triple H is not some creative genius. He's just maybe not as bad as Vince. That's like saying Hitler is bad, but Joseph Stalin stacked up more bodies. That doesn't make one good. It just makes them different levels of suck. Now, Marcus, you watch the product far more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I only see it more on a semi-regular occasion whenever there's something relevant. Like I watched Raw after Mania. It wasn't good. But then again, the last few Raw after Manias haven't been good. So this isn't new or surprising. But I'll ask you, as a regular connoisseur of Monday Night Raw and maybe Friday Night SmackDown, do you feel that Triple H has been a good booker, or do you think he's been better than Vince? And I want to be very clear, being better than Vince does not make him a good booker. It just makes him better than Vince. Or do you think he's been as bad, if not worse, than Vince? So you have four categories. Good booker, better than Vince, as good as Vince, or as bad as Vince, or even worse than Vince. Those are your four options. Which one do you think Triple H has been since returning or since taking over control of the company?
Not as bad as Vince. The reason why I say that is because I think, ironically enough, it seems like the women have and I've seen other people say this as well. I think the women have regressed in a way. Not that it was super tremendous before, but again, like you said, that bar is so low, it's insane. Like you said, it kind of feels like he lucked into the Roman thing, but that's something you can kind of just let go on itself. Kind of took on the life of his own. You got Roman, you got Heyman, just kind of let them do their thing, and that kind of takes on the life of his own. Bianca is brilliant, but a lot of her run has been mired by repetitive, lackluster opponents. But she just works because of how good she is, and it's not a lot of pros if any with that young lady. So that works. But everything else kind of just feels like middling and not really competitive. We talked about the lackluster build for Mania overall. Like the only thing that really had story going in was like with the Usos, just the bloodline storyline on both sides, and what Mysterio storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, and I just think, and because we've been watching it for so long, because we talk about it all the time, and certainly seeing your opinion on it, like it's just one of them things where it's like it's just kind of like you said, it's not he's not making the as many cons as Vince, but he hasn't exactly added a bunch of pros, right? Like because people have been starving for so long for logic, him pulling back and just letting Karrion Cross be normal seemed like he, pulled out an ace quarterback or something, and late in the trade or something. And that's not what it is. So it's just one of them things where I think him kind of leveling out the ludicrous stuff that Vince did, it just kind of made him seem more than what he was because he kind of just pulled back on the BS and didn't really take it to the next level anyway. So ultimately, like I said, it's not he pulled back on the cons, but he didn't exactly add pros either.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think when you look at what Triple H has done, the creative genius that he was in NXT was really defined mostly by one or two nice matches every big show, not so much in the week to week. But then again, some people also get stuck up in the idea of the culture shock, the progressive zeitgeist. Once something seems to get traction with the community, not the community AJ Styles is slightly afraid of. But like once it gets caught up with the wrestling community, to buck the trend would make you seem like you're just a contrarian, and nobody wants to be a contrarian because a contrarian just says things to be counterproductive, counteractive, and falling in line with everyone locked up and licking boots just because it's popular isn't exactly the way to go either. So being fair and honest, yeah, NXT had a lot of great matches, but they were all the same matches, and they didn't really make any stars. There aren't really any guys that are out there that did the work in NXT that you're like, yeah, I could build a promotion around them. I think the closest one might be Adam Cole, and that's not. And we've seen that that's not even realistically possible because he was not a great champion, dollars to donuts for Ring of Honor. So I think Triple H gained a lot of hype for being smart enough to go, Johnny Gargano's a great worker. I'll put him in a 30-minute main event and people will love it. And that's what they did. And they were
Yeah,
able to pack 12,000 seats and, gained 20,000 viewers.
yeah, it's just the thing. Like I don't, like I said, it just not be crapping on his whole run. Like it's been some real good stuff here and there. But like I said, a lot of that has been like so much of the narrative on all these shows, both Raw and SmackDown, have been carried by people kind of just looking forward to whatever Roman was doing that week.
Mm-hmm.
And if he came over to Raw, that was a plus. But primarily, people was hyped for SmackDown because that's where he primarily was. Um, Now, obviously, and I don't know because ironically, I know this didn't come up in the notes, but the draft is coming back, and
Mm-hmm.
while that may seem like a big deal, we know how that always goes. So that's um, but ultimately, Vince was always trying to put round pegs in square holes. So when Triple H come out like, no, the round one goes here, like, oh my God, he's a freaking genius. Like it's just it don't it's just the easiest thing to go with. Like Rey Mysterio's a high flyer, almost as a muscle man. Why do you have them doing opposite things? As an example. Yeah.
When it comes to the draft, it never, like, especially with the NXT system, it never should be about drafting talent from one another. The only time talent should exchange between brands are on draft night and via trade. But the draft should be, especially since it's in April or maybe May, depending on when. It's going to be closer on to the NFL draft. It should be about drafting NXT talent. Building the draft around the next wave of talent is a great idea that they need to truly execute. And if they can do that, limit the movement between guys on rosters and actually start building up rosters. I think either moving SmackDown to 3 hours, which would suck, or moving Raw to 2 hours, which is the way to go. Well, that won't do it. That's when you can start to have actual cohesion in this idea of a brand split. But they actually have to commit to the brand split because the brand split's not a bad idea. In 2016, it worked. In 2002, 2003, and 4, and 5, and 6, it worked. It wasn't the brand's fault that the WWE didn't know how to create new talent. So I think having that would be a good idea, and focusing on the development and drafting of the young talent would put some onus and some pre-hype on some of these names. Because like if you had Bronson Steiner and Carmelo Hayes go 1 and 2, that would set up some big to do, and then you could actually do a brand warfare show that would actually make sense that people would want to see because they only interact one time per year. But the fact is, like, WWE does not understand that lesser is more. And that's why you constantly get 2 Money in the Banks, 2 War Games, 2 Hell in a Cells. And you just get inundated with the same nonsense over and over again. And people are like, well, why doesn't anyone watch? Why do people leave in droves? Like, why is the business down? Like, why aren't we making as much money as we used to? Because you keep oversaturating good ideas. Good ideas are only good ideas when they're first heard. The more times you hear it, it stops becoming a good idea and starts becoming the norm.
Yeah, and essentially these drafts are empty promises at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And the eras you brought up were 2000, early 2000, and 2016. Reason why those worked so well is because they actually committed. You're talking about doing these type of things and getting people hyped for it. Ultimately, don't mean nothing. It'll make for something to maybe to look at on the night, but ultimately it won't mean nothing. You draft these people to these shows, and they just come through on the other shows anyway. It don't stick, and then you'll do a show like Survivor Series or Bragging Rights or something like that. It's like, oh, such and such is Team SmackDown. I'm like, he just got traded yesterday. What brand loyalty does he have? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it makes no sense. So it's like all them times they were supposed to be doing a draft, and then all of a sudden the Super Show idea came. It's like you don't commit to the stuff you stand on, so it don't you don't stand on nothing. So it just all this stuff is just like little PR stunts.
I completely agree. Completely agree. All right, let's move on. Speaking of freezes, Eric Young is in the company. We've talked about that. So, according to Sean Ross Sapp, he's been under company, but he hasn't been used in any on-screen capacity since the writing. Sapp wrote that there has been no word on Young being backstage at WWE shows during the period in which he has been signed. The report notes that Triple H and his regime recruited Young after he took over in the summer of 2022, following the Vince McMahon's retirement. Young previously spent a few years with WWE. He was leader of Sanity, and he had a brief singles run. WWE released him in the wake of cuts in 2020 and returned to Impact in July of that same year. Marcus, is Young done in WWE before he's even come back, or do you think there's a chance that Eric Young could actually, for lack of a better term, make an impact?
I don't know, man. He's like I said, he's the tatted naked mole rat. Um, and obviously for a time he was making it work in his group in NXT, but that was during a specific time in that system, and I don't necessarily know how that transfer to the main roster with stuff that's going on. I mean, there's always potential for it, but for now, I don't know. Obviously, he's left Impact again, did his stint with Violent by Design, but I don't know. Like you say, so he's like looking to re-sign, or we just don't know.
So he's already with the WWE. He signed with them in November, but they haven't used him since he signed. And considering that he's been sitting under contract for 6 months, making money, it's fair to insinuate that people are watching this happen in real time, and that there's a good chance, a very good chance, that this will deter others that are currently, thinking about going to the WWE from going to the WWE. Because if Eric Young, a big time signing that Triple H is very high on, isn't being used, then what does that tell you? That there's really no possibility that guys who don't have his name value will actually make it, because why would they? It's
Yeah,
it's 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 a disaster situation.
yeah, it's weird too because the last time he left because he felt like he wasn't being utilized, or he felt like he was a star player and he got sat on the bench. It kind of feels like that way again with the "we have nothing for you" deal, and if, like I said, with this whole murder and everything that's going on, and hiring practices are getting funny, and if they do another bus flip, if you will, or Black Friday, as some call it, somebody that's just been sitting at home collecting a paycheck is easily cuttable.
Mm-hmm.
And if the reason why he left the last time was because I guess the guy that was putting him on in the game, if you will, off the bench was Vince, and um, the stash himself is potentially having a little bit more power, regardless of what he says in the interview in terms of hirings and firings, or just who gets used. Potentially, he might end up being in the same situation, just I guess with more hope this time around than he had last time because Triple H is more involved. But again, like you said, if it's been 6 months and he's not injured, um, he might just be waiting to be dropped.
If he does get dropped, if Eric Young finds his way back to free agency, I think that'll be very interesting to see what ends up happening. Because at a certain point, if you're Impact, don't you just get tired of it? Like, we brought you back once, then you left, and we brought you back again, then you left. Now it's like, what's the fucking point? Like, why keep doing it? Though I will say this, the design was better with him at the charge, and I think Cody Deaner works a lot better as a comedy act, but that's just my opinion. Edge says he wants to. Edge said that he feels disappointed by never working with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And Marcus, I asked to you, had Edge and Stone Cold ever really had a program? Do you think it would have been worth seeing?
I don't know. I mean, look, I mean, he said himself that that match he had with Mick Foley kicked him up to another gear in his career. That was a career defining match for him. Um, and I think when he really turned it up into that rated R status and uh, really got to moving early on, I think they could have did something with that. Um, Although it might have got interrupted because it was just a point where he was going his thing, and then obviously Orton was still in a way the Legend Killer, not necessarily specifically where Legend was still doing something like that of that ilk. Uh, yeah, but I could see it in a way. Edge calling out Stone Cold or whatever, or it just be a segment. I think Vicky would have been a good through line to get him to him and Stone Cold together because I could easily see Vicky just popping off at the mouth. Stone Cold easily, I could easily see Vicky being up to take a stunner. Then that propels Edge and something to do a little program, whatever. Obviously, a younger Stone Cold. So I don't exactly know how it would have went, but it would have been interesting. Obviously, like I said, in his heyday, because now, no, it just wouldn't. We talked about what happened with Stone Cold and KO at Mania, and Edge is practically on his way out the door for good. So
I still think that there's something there if you want to do it now. I think if you're talking about a big money WrestleMania SummerSlam caliber main event, I don't think it'd be great, but I think it could be as good, if not better, than the Kevin Owens Stone Cold match, which I don't think was that good. And considering both guys are pushing or in their 50s, I think a crazy ass brawl might exactly be what people are looking forward to. And it could be a great last match for both men. I don't know if Edge's star has ever ascended to the level of Stone Cold's. I know that's going to be blasphemy for some people. But putting Stone Cold in a match with somebody at this point in time, it should be bigger than it is, and like it should have been bigger than Kevin Owens because Kevin Owens, not for any fault of himself though, I don't think Kevin Owens is the greatest worker ever either. Never really raised to the level that he should have been to face Stone Cold. And I don't know if anyone on the roster besides maybe John Cena and maybe Roman Reigns are at that level. I don't know if Edge has ever been or will ever be, but it would be a nice once in a lifetime big money match that you can market. So
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think when you talk about, and I gotta agree with you that I don't think Edge kind of reached that pinnacle. Because when you talk about Stone Cold and The Rock and Roman Reigns, um, and I forgot who else you mentioned, but those guys like Cena. That's who else you mentioned. They're in that tier now where it's like even if people don't know wrestling, they know them or they recognize them. That's the tier they're at, which could very well lead to off into another conversation about TV time we go get off into. But they're up in that kind of echelon. Obviously, Roman will be on the lower tier of that because obviously he's kind of in that character zone to get that visibility. But yeah, I don't know if you bring up Edge to people who really don't watch wrestling like that, that'll know who that is. But Stone Cold, The Rock, John Cena, like everybody knows smell what The Rock is cooking. Everybody knows the glass shattering and flipping off your boss. And most people recognize that You Can't See Me, which got repopularized recently with the whole LSU thing.
So with that, let's move on to Johnny Swinger. Another conversational point. Johnny Swinger says of Barry Horowitz, he's a star. If you're on TV every week, you're a star. And Marcus, we talk a lot about what defines a pro wrestler: work rate, bio rate, popularity, or move sets. And I think by now we all understand that being good in the ring is necessary, but being a character is the most important thing going. I don't think wrestling has a lot of great characters right now, which is why I kind of glom so much onto Danhausen, because I think Danhausen is one of the best characters going. I love watching Johnny Swinger because he's a great character. And I think being a great character precludes you being a great star. Being a great star means you get on TV. Being on TV means you're a star. I get all that. Marcus, do you agree with Johnny Swinger that if you're on TV all the time that you're a star?
Yeah, I guess it depends on your definition of a star. What that means, because the minute you said that, I was like, we seen James Ellsworth on the TV a lot during his run, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but you take him and you put him in another company, and some people might not even recognize him, but they'll you put him in WWE, and all of a sudden he's the no chin wonder. Or put him right next to the Carmelo. It's like, oh yeah, that's the guy. Um, so I think there's obviously a notion to that. Um, but when you talk about being anything past that, that leads off into the conversation you was talking about, or the points you were making about you being good in the ring is just not enough anymore. Everybody's kind of good in the ring these days. We're kind of in that era. But
Mm-hmm.
when you connect with the audience through a character, you might not necessarily even need to be in the ring for an extended period of time and get the same reaction that guys that have to do 930s and um we're just gonna call it the Van Kingo move set um to get a reaction. I mean, you look at names like Danhausen, Rosemary, um, Undertaker in his day. Those type of characters and stuff stick with people, and they'll always be able to get a pop. Some of these guys can't get a pop unless they're flying through a flaming table coming off a Hell in a Cell. So, yeah.
You're not wrong. So let's talk about Chris Sabin. 20 years with Impact. Granted, it's not a consensual. Nope, that's not right. Consent. Nope. It hasn't been 20 concurrent years. There we go. Consecutive. That's what I'm looking for. He left, I want to say, in 2015 and was gone until about, or he left in 2016 and was gone until about 2020, I think he returned. But 20 years with Impact. He debuted there in 2003. And the thing that has always kind of crossed my mind is he does not get the same credit that I think he deserves. I think if you were to do a true and God honest poll of the best matches in Impact, the biggest moments in Impact, the longest tenure in Impact, the most titles won, the most significance in Impact, I think Chris Sabin would hold his own against anyone. Obviously, like if you talk about buy rates and draws, there are bigger names. Sting and Kurt Angle come to mind. If you talk about 5-star matches, AJ Styles may have the most. But if you talk about the most 4-star matches, if you talk about the guy who's been just under the main event on more times than not, if you talk about the guys who've won the X Division title the most times, I think it's been Chris Sabin. I think Chris Sabin's either won the most or is close to winning the most tag team titles in history. He's been with the company for 20 years, won every belt, and he's just a great dude that people seem to love. So I ask this, Marcus: do you think Chris Sabin is the face of TNA wrestling for its history, considering the relevance he's had and the significance that he's had with the company?
I think he's certainly one of them. If we go on a Mount Rushmore, I think you got to put him up there. Um, and in terms of that concept of him being underrated, I think it's because of just that consistency. He's just been so reliable and does so well in that spot that it's never like over the top with anything. He just comes out there, does his thing, um, does well. And obviously in singles, he made his mark. But then with the machine guns as well. So it's kind of like he's really done a great job at playing it both, almost too well to the point where it's almost like his rate of consistency is also why he's being deemed underrated in a way by people, or don't get enough credit as he should by people, which is weird, but that's just kind of how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, look, you gotta you talk about him, and we always talk about like pillars of impact of TNA or whatever. In both instances, you got to put them up there. Obviously, they could have did better in terms of what happened with the world title, but circumstances being what they were, stuff happened. Can't take that back. But he's on the books as a world champion, and it's not nothing he hasn't done in the company. Moments he hasn't had. He's had classics as tag team, classics as a singles. You can't say that the man isn't a legend in that, and legend is certainly in that company. So, um, you talking about that? I can't. Just on stats alone, you can't argue what you said.
So all time the guns are one, two, three, tied for tied for third. They have the same number of reigns as the Good Brothers, although the Good Brothers have 418 combined days, which makes me sick. In terms of days held with the tag titles, there's 6 with 357. Only the North, the Wolves, the Good Brothers, Beer Money Inc., and LAX with Ortiz and Santana have held the belts for more combined days. As far as X Division goes, he has 8 title reigns, 2 more than anyone else. Austin Aries, Jay Lethal, AJ Styles have the next with 6. None of those guys are likely to come back to Impact anytime soon. And days combined, he has 432, which is more than Austin Aries, Samoa Joe, Trevor Lee, and Trey Miguel, who's 5th currently. Miguel may break Sabin's all-time status. I don't want him to, because even though Trey Miguel's a good talent in his own right, I think Sabin historically is better. And I think some records should be untouched for guys who, just are on a different level, which I think Chris Sabin is. By the by, he's the best part of the last or latest season of Wrestle House.
Oh, absolutely. Which is that concept and last two that we've had is just ripe for like surprises about who's gonna like take over as the thing. The fact that they looped a murder mystery into that whole thing is still insane to me.
Right. It's pretty fantastic. Sabin returned in 2020 at Slammiversary, I think. They defeated the Rascals. Pandemic era. Cannot wait to forget that. All right, now we have some quick hits. Santana is still with AEW, although for how long we don't know. Fightful Select says that Santana remains with AEW, and the company has paid him throughout his time on the sidelines because he's recovering from a torn ACL. I think it was a torn ACL. Santana is done with his partner Ortiz, and his contract is set to expire in September. But even though he might be a free agent, it's very likely AEW will extend his contract, assuming there's no friction between AEW and Santana, because they'll extend it for the days missed. I don't have any questions about this, Marcus. It'd be nice to see Santana back, but clearly there are some issues with him and Ortiz, and I don't know why. New Japan and Noah and All Japan Pro Wrestling are teasing an announcement coming April 12th. Some people believe it's going to be a tournament combining all three of the biggest companies in Japan. Marcus, do you have any thoughts on what you would like to see when it comes to what this announcement could be?
No, I'm gonna wait to be pleasantly surprised. Obviously, we seeing like some really exciting stuff coming out in New Japan and uh, both on the men's and women's side of things. So I think it's just and I think we're seeing more collaboration as well on all sides of the industry. Thankfully, um, so I don't really have no expectations. I don't really get a chance to catch a lot of stuff from those particular companies because obviously when I look at the Japanese wrestling, I'm primarily looking at New Japan. But I would like to expand those horizons. Um, so, and obviously, as of late, past year, GLEAT, but yeah, All Japan and that's. I mean, look, it can only be something good, right? So,
That's the hope. So then we move on to NWA 312, which is apparently the area code for Chicago, or at least one of the two area codes for northern Chicago. There's a 7 area code in there as well. 14 matches, uh, 4 of which were on the pre-show, 11 of which were on the main card. Here's the rundown. Natalia Markova, who is gorgeous, defeated La Brava Escobar. The Country Gentlemen, AJ Kazanza and Anthony Andrews, defeated the SVGs, Jack Stadium and Blake Bulletproof Troop, with Chris Silvio Esquire by pinfall. That was for the tag team, the NWA United States Tag Team title. So that was a title change, I think. No, they defended their belts, excuse me. Gags the Gimp defeated Sal the Pal by pinfall. It was a hair versus mask strap match. And then Trevor Murdoch and Mike Knox defeated Daisy Kill and Talos to close out the pre-show. To open up the main show, EC3 with Black G's defeated Scion with Austin Idol by submission to win the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. Maddie Rankowski and Missy Cage retained their NWA World Women's Tag Team titles against Pretty Empowered, which is Ella Envy and Roxy by pinfall. Kratos defeated Yabo the Clown in a singles match. Throwbilly Silas Mason last won the Bob Luce Memorial Battle Royal to determine the number one contender for the NWA National Heavyweight Championship. So Throwbilly Silas Mason will take on EC3 at some point. Kenzie Page defeated Max the Impaler with Father James Mitchell to win the inaugural NWA World Women's Television Championship. Kerry Morton with his father and Ricky Morton defeated Joe Alonzo with Jamie Stanley to retain the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship. Bully Ray defeated Thumb Latimer by disqualification. I'm pretty sure these two assholes already had a tables match. Like, I don't know what the hell's going on there. NWA World Tag Team Champions Lala Rebellion, Bestia 666, and Mecha Wolf defeated Magnum Muscle, Dax Draper, and Mims to retain the belts for the NWA World Tag Team titles. Camille defeated La Rosa Negra, who apparently buried the hatchet with Tessa Blanchard, probably in a bid for Tessa Blanchard to return to wrestling, probably with the NWA, I would assume. But Camille defeated La Rosa Negra to retain the NWA World Women's Championship. And then Tyrus defeated Chris Adonis, the former Chris Masters, by pinfall to retain the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. So, yeah, 50-year-old Tyrus is still the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And I don't know why. But I'm not going to ask any questions. We're just going to move on because now we have to talk about Rebellion. This is Rebellion Week. We have this Sunday at 8 p.m. in Toronto. We have Rebellion at the Rebel Entertainment Complex, which I think is where they shot their last few shows, I think. I will Google that here very quickly. Marcus, are you excited about Rebellion this week?
yeah. Yeah, they've kind of been on a roll for me with a lot of these shows. I'm pretty consistent over the past year and some change with their big shows. And coming off of this multiverse show, which was nuts, and I went back and watched it, man. Like some of those matches was insane. That tag match on now, good stuff. So looking forward to what they do, and, obviously we gonna get into the main event, but I'm looking forward to that as well. Obviously, we brought up different variable options for that, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they, how they pull that out.
So the Rebel complex has been used a few times in the past. I think at a Slammiversary or two. It's the one that has the big screen over the entrance that they've used. So we've seen this one before. As for the matches, we have PCO versus Eddie Edwards. The design, which is Diener, Angels, Callahan, and or Khan, taking on Dirty Dango, Joe Henry, and Santino Morello in a six-man tag match. The Coven, which is Kylan King and Taylor Wilde, taking on the Death Dolls, Jessica and Rosemary. Bullet Club, Ace Austin and Chris Bay taking on the Motor City Machine Guns in a tag team match. But this is for the This is an Ultimate X match, so that's gonna be dope. Trey Miguel will take on John Gresham and Mike Bailey in a which will be a triple threat. And then Tommy Dreamer with himself, Frankie Kazarian, Yuya Uemura, Killer Kelly, and Bhupinder Gujar. I think I said that right. I probably didn't. Taking on Bully Ray, Jason Hodge, John Schuyler, the Good Hands, Kenny King, and Masa Slamovich in a 10 wrestler hardcore war. We have a triple threat match or possibly a singles match, depending on Mickey James' health. If it's all three, it's going to be Mickey James taking on Jordan Grace and Deanna Prazzo. If Mickey James can't go, it'll just be Jordan Grace and Deanna Prazzo duking it out for the Impact Knockouts World Tag Team title. The Impact Knockouts World Championship. There's no tagging here. Then in the main event, it's Kushida versus Steve Macklin for the vacant Impact World title. And if Macklin wins, this will be the worst thing to happen to the title since Tessa Blanchard. I don't think he's a good talent. At least he's not good enough to be a world champion, but I think this cheese may stand alone. Marcus, do you have any predictions? Do you want to do predictions? Do you have any thoughts?
You said that they're gonna be triple threat, Miguel and Gresham
And
and Bailey.
Speedball, yeah.
Uh, okay, that's gonna be a triple threat for the title. Um, that's good. And you said for the tag, it's gonna be like what a three-way Ultimate X or just a.
No, it's just got 2-on-2 Ultimate X. It's going to be the Bullet Club versus the Machine Guns in an Ultimate X match.
Oh, that's gonna be sick. But I need to see. I need to see three title changes. I need to see title changes with the X because I don't like the besmirchment of the X Division Championship. Um, it really chaps my ass, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, I need to either option that happens. We need to see a new women crown, women's champion crown.
Okay.
Um, particularly Grace. Um, and I gotta go with my guy Kushida. That's my guy. And seeing as you vehemently clearly don't want it to be Macklin, I like my bet. But I do appreciate the fact that they are putting him in this position finally, because essentially that's what they've been building to. Like he's been on a streak. He's been the guy gets a major win, and then somebody gets in the front of him, and then he has something else to say about it. So I appreciate them following through on that. But I need my boy Kushida to tap him out. He had a hell of a match with my other boy Leo Rush at that multiverse thing, but I think he's ready. I don't think Macklin has as many tools to pull out a win as Kushida does in a big money match like this.
So when it comes to the last rights match, we're not sure if Alicia Edwards is the driver or not. It's being expected that she is, but I would like to see Eddie go over to PCO with the debut of a new talent. Because a few weeks ago, somebody ran over PCO and Eddie's desert fight. And I don't think it was Alicia Edwards, but I would like it to be someone of value. So I'm going to go with Eddie to win. Dirty Dango, Joe Hendry, and Santino to win six-man. The Coven to retain the tag titles. The Machine Guns to win Ultimate X, but I don't think they're going to. I think Bullet Club will retain. Let's go John Gresham with the X Division win.
Hey,
I like Bailey, I do, but Gresham walked away from Ring of Honor and AEW, so I feel like giving him something to be like, listen, You good. We like you. Please stay.
Yeah, man, and give him and the wife some posing title picture thing. Yeah.
Just hopefully not posing on OnlyFans. Then I have Team Dreamer going over Team Bully. I have Jordan winning the Knockouts Championship, and then hope to God Kushida wins the world title and holds it until no longer than Slammiversary in June or as early as the next pay-per-view. Not pay-per-view, set of tapings.
Because our boy Alexander is due out indefinitely, right? So we just don't know what that.
Let's see. How long does it take to return from a torn bicep? Torn bicep can be 3 to 4 months. So he's going to be gone for a while, and I don't know if and when he'll get another world title run. Honestly, like at this point, Eddie, Joe Hendry, I'm just looking at the card to see who's available. Sabin or Shelley. I'd even go Frankie Kazarian or Bully Ray or Tommy Dreamer. I think all of them make better choices than Kushida and Steve Macklin, but that's just me.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever put uh a-hole Bully or soccer mom Tit Dreamer in the running for most things. But we'll see how it goes.
Like in general, I wouldn't either, but desperate times calls for desperate situations. So that's it. That's the show for you. Mark, any final thoughts?
No, that's about it. That was a hell of a slate to run through.
I totally agree. Let's wrap it up with our socials. Mark is going to be found on Twitter at ParadoxKid, ParadoxKid.
That's me.
You can also find him on his other podcast, The True Penny Show, TruePennyShow, on Twitter. They will be covering GLEAT, New Japan, and other things in the world of wrestling, so check them out. I'm sure they'll have more to say about Sexy Sonata winning the big sexy belt, or the not so sexy belt, depending on how you feel about it. You can find me on Twitter at Chad Nerdcorp, ChadNerdCorp, and on the Instagram at Chad's Photo at ChadSPHOTOHUT. We'll be back next Monday for another edition of the Wrestling Underground podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for giving us a chance. Remember, as always, to watch more wrestling. And Marcus, take us home.
Good night, me.